Hi everyone, trust you all are doing well. So we're going to be dealing with the pages folder right here. There's quite a lot of content that we have to cover, so we'll be broken up into a couple of episodes. So let's start off with the first one, the index.js. So this is basically what we see when we spin up a local server. In order to do that, you just open up your terminal and run npm run dev and click the link for the local host 3000. Okay. So let me just minimize this. So let's start off everything inside your index.js. Control all and delete it. All right. Now I'm doing this quite deliberately because I want you guys to not be afraid of any errors that you might get. It's all part of the learning process. So as you can see, this is basically how an error page will look like. So we will get a server error, and the error is the default export is not a React component, and it will show you at which page it is. So inside there, as you can see, the index.js is referring to the / is this page right here. Now, React is a component-based library. It was created that way. Now, in order to create a component in React / NEXT.js, we can create them in two ways. We can create a class-based component, or we can create a function-based component. Right? So we got a function component, or we can have a class component. Now this is ES6 is made use of class components, but this is just synthetic sugar on top of the previous JavaScript. But you can create classes in JavaScript. Now let's quickly create a class component. In order to create a class component, if you're used to PHP, you can just type in class and you can put the name of the class. This must be capital letters as the standard, so class, and then we can just say extends. All right, now it extends. In this case, it will be React.component like this. Okay, so now we created our class right there. Now you will see if I press save, we're going to get an error. Now, as you can see, React is not defined. Now, in order to define it, what we do in JavaScript, we put import, okay, and then we're just going to say React from, and then we can just say React like that. All right. So now we may get access to React. Now, in order to get use of the React, we basically have it in when we do the Next.js installation. You will see in the dependencies right there, you will see we got the React installed like this. Okay. So that's why we're making use of it like that. All right. So if you just wonder where that is coming from. Okay. Now you'll see, we see that the default is not a React component, so we still get the same error. Now, in order to get the error to disappear and it's actually part of React, we need to export the default of the name of the component that we just created. Now, in this case, it's called home right there. All right. So in a class-based component, there's obviously a couple of things missing because there's nothing that's being returned. All right. Now, in order to return anything, as you can see, the render is not a function, so we need to add that in there. So render. Okay, so that is the first part. And if we save that, you will see we get a missing. It's not returning anything. So we need to return something in here. So what we want to return is we want to return just an H1. Okay, and an H1. In this case, I'm just going to call it home. So as you can see, there we got our home right there. So the errors disappear, and this is basically our class-based component. So you can do it in two ways. You can do it this way, or you can remove everything in there. So let me just remove the export, edit in front of the class, and then you can do everything like that. That's most people's preferred way to do it, but I like to use arrow functions, and I cannot do this with arrow functions, which we're going to get to in a second, and I'm doing this at the end right there. Okay. Now, this is basically, let me just minimize this. So this is basically our class-based component right there. Now, another note that I just want to mention. Normally, you will not just return an H1 like this. Okay. You will normally want to add additional content. As you can see, I'm getting an error right there. So let us see the error. As you can see, failed to compile. This is another error that you will get as well. Undermined the regex literal. Okay. So how do we fix this? Now, in React, you must put everything under one main component, so a main element actually. So in this case, all right, so in this case, it can be an empty fragment. So this is part of React. So you can either put it in an empty fragment, or you can put it in, like in this case, let's say you're at the main like this, all right? So as you can see, nothing, no error right there, as long as it's between the main elements like this. But in my case, I love to use empty fragments like this. You can use it like this, or you can use a fragment like that. Let me just add it in here. Or you can use it like that. But when you use it like this, you must make sure you import it right there as well. All right, so that is basically how you can do it. But just make sure it's between a main element like this. Now, in my case, like I said, I like to use the empty fragment. All right, now this is basically a class-based component. So let's quickly create a function component. So let's remove everything. Right, so you can see we can still get the same error. So if in order to create a function component, we just have used the keyword function, the name of the function. So in our case, home, just remember the convention is capital, all right? And then we just return something. Let's just, without returning anything, let's just do a function like this. As you can see, the export default. So let's just add our export default in there. And let's add the home. Return it. As you can see, it renders or returns nothing. So let's quickly return something in here. Now, so now you must know just the root elements. So in this case, like this. So we got our fragment, and then in there we can just type our h1, and I'm just going to say home like that. As you can see, we get our home right here. So this is one way to do the function, or like many people prefer, to put the export in front of that. So they don't have to worry about forgetting to add the export default in there. So if I save that and I refresh it, you can see we still get the same thing. All right. So that is one way to create a component with a class-based or function-based. Now this part is my favorite part to create components, and that is the ES6 way to create a function. And we're going to call that arrow functions. So we create a constant and we call that home. And then we're just going to put parentheses, and then we create the arrow, and then we just return the same thing. Okay, so in this case, we're just going to return with a fragment. Actually, not like that. A fragment, and we're just going to type in h1, and I'm just going to say home arrow. Okay, now we're just going to get the same error, export default. So just remember, export default and home right there. Okay, so as you can see, home arrow. So that's basically how we can create components in React. In our case now is Next.js. So that is just standard React right now. So we haven't delved in the Next.js part, but since we're just doing completely beginner course, I just want to go over the basics. All right, so this is my favorite way to do it. So you can obviously choose how you want to do it. Now, I just want to mention this, the difference between class-based and function-based. Now, if you have any logic that you want to deal with inside your component, use class-based components, okay? If you want to carry the state, or let's say handle the logic, local, basically the local state, you can use class-based components for that, all right? And mostly anything that can be done using React hooks in function components. So you will see quite a lot of people using function components, either the arrow functions or the normal functions, all right? Because there's quite a lot of React hooks that you can use to do the more or less the same than you can do with class components, okay? So that's just a quick, just a side note. All right, so what I want to do in the next episode, as you guys can see, I'm talking about fragments. Right, so I'm talking about fragments, and it looks like normal HTML, but it's actually not normal HTML. It's actually called JSX. So I want to discuss that more in the next episode. So if you guys want to know more about that, so that will be in the next one. All right, so see you guys there, and adios.